The stars looked different from the bridge of the USS Defiance. Commander Jake Morrison stood at the main viewing window, watching space bend around their ship as they traveled faster than light. 3 months they had been exploring this sector of the galaxy, mapping new star systems and looking for signs of intelligent life. Today, they had found more than they bargained for. "Commander, we're receiving a transmission," called out Lieutenant Amy Walsh from the communications station. Her voice carried a mix of excitement and worry. "It's not from Earth, sir. The signal is coming from that massive ship off our starboard side." Jake turned to look at the tactical display. Captain Lisa Rodriguez, his tactical officer, was already pulling up the sensor readings. What they saw made everyone on the bridge fall silent. The alien vessel was enormous, easily 10 times the size of their own ship. Its hull gleamed like polished silver, covered in strange symbols that seemed to glow with their own light. "How did they get so close without us detecting them?" Jake asked, trying to keep his voice calm. The crew was looking to him for leadership, and he could not show fear now. "Their technology is unlike anything we've seen," Rodriguez replied, her fingers dancing across the control panel. "Our sensors barely registered them until they wanted us to see them. Their ship generates almost no heat signature, and their engines don't produce any radiation we can detect." Dr. Ben Carter, the ship's science officer, was already analyzing the readings from his station. "Commander, the energy patterns coming from their vessel are incredible. They're using power sources that make our fusion reactors look like campfires. And those formations on their hull appear to be some kind of defensive system." The transmission came through the speakers, and a voice spoke in perfect English. The accent was strange, with sounds that seemed to echo in ways that human voices never did. "Human vessel, you are in the territory of the Zephyrian Empire. I am High Admiral Vexstar of the Imperial Fleet. You will prepare to be boarded for inspection." Jake looked at his crew. They were all trained military personnel, but none of them had ever faced a situation like this. First contact with an alien species was supposed to be a moment of celebration, not a potential threat. He activated the communication system and spoke clearly. "This is Commander Jake Morrison of the Earth vessel USS Defiance. We come in peace and wish to establish diplomatic relations with your people. We had no knowledge that this was your territory." There was a long pause before the alien voice responded. When it came, there was something in the tone that sounded almost like amusement. "Earth, yes, we have heard of your small world. Very well, Commander Morrison. We will board your vessel and evaluate your species. Do not attempt to resist or activate any defensive systems." Before Jake could respond, a bright light filled the bridge. When the light faded, 3 figures stood in the center of the command deck. The crew reached for their weapons, but Jake held up his hand to stop them. The aliens were tall and thin, with pale blue skin that seemed to shimmer. They wore form-fitting suits that looked more like liquid metal than fabric. The one in the center, who had to be High Admiral Vexstar, carried himself with the bearing of someone used to absolute authority. "Primitive," Vexstar said, looking around the bridge with obvious disdain. "Your technology is thousands of years behind ours. How did your species even achieve space travel with such crude methods?" Dr. Carter stepped forward, his scientific curiosity overcoming his caution. "Your transportation technology is remarkable. How did you materialize on our ship without using any kind of vehicle?" Vexstar looked at Carter as if he were a child, asking about basic mathematics. "Personal teleportation fields. We perfected this technology before your species learned to make fire. But perhaps you can show us these weapons you humans are so fond of using against each other." Jake hesitated. Showing their military capabilities to an unknown alien species could be dangerous, but refusing might be seen as hostile. He nodded to Rodriguez, who began displaying information about human weapon systems on the main screen. "These are our primary ship-to-ship combat systems," Rodriguez explained. "Magnetic railguns that fire dense metal projectiles at high velocity, nuclear missiles with fusion warheads. And our personal weapons include ballistic rifles, explosive charges, and kinetic impact weapons." The 3 Zephyrians looked at each other and began making sounds that Jake realized must be laughter. Vexstar shook his head in what appeared to be disbelief. Kinetic projectiles? You still throw rocks at your enemies? Vexstar's voice dripped with condescension. Your species fights wars by hurling pieces of metal through space? How wonderfully primitive. One of the other Zephyrians stepped forward and activated a device on his wrist. Suddenly, a shimmering barrier appeared around him, like a soap bubble made of light. Observe, he said. He pulled out what looked like a weapon and fired it at the wall. A beam of pure energy struck the metal, leaving a glowing hole. Then he turned the weapon on himself and fired. The energy beam struck his shield and simply disappeared, absorbed into the shimmering barrier without causing any damage. Energy shields, Vexstar explained with obvious pride. They have protected our ships and soldiers for over 3,000 years. Any energy-based attack is absorbed and converted to harmless light. Explosive weapons have their force redirected away from the target. Even your most powerful nuclear weapons would be useless against our defenses. Dr. Carter was frantically taking notes on his portable computer. The field seems to analyze incoming energy and automatically adjust to neutralize it. The power requirements must be enormous. Not for a civilization that has mastered the fundamental forces of the universe, Vexstar replied. Your bullets and missiles are toys compared to our plasma cannons and energy weapons. A single one of our ships could destroy your entire fleet without taking any damage. Jake felt a cold knot forming in his stomach. If what the alien was saying was true, humanity was completely outmatched. What do you want from us? He asked. Vexstar walked to the viewing window and looked out at the stars. The Zephyrian Empire has brought peace and order to thousands of worlds. We offer the same to your species. Submit to our rule, accept our guidance, and your people will be protected and provided for. Refuse, and we will be forced to demonstrate why resistance is futile. You're talking about conquest, Rodriguez said, her hand moving instinctively toward her sidearm. We prefer to call it enlightenment, Vexstar replied calmly. Your species shows potential, but you are like children playing with dangerous toys. Under our guidance, humanity could evolve beyond your current primitive state. Jake looked at his crew. He could see the anger in their faces, but also the fear. The technological gap between humans and Zephyrians seemed impossible to bridge. How long do we have to consider your offer? 1 of your Earth years, Vexstar? Sighed. That should give your leaders time to understand the wisdom of accepting our protection. We will return to receive your answer. I suggest you use the time to study our capabilities and consider the alternatives. The 3 aliens began to glow with the same bright light that had brought them aboard. Remember, Commander Morrison, Vexstar said as he began to fade away, your bullets and bombs are relics of a violent past. The future belongs to those who have evolved beyond such crude methods. The light flashed again, and the aliens were gone. The bridge was quiet for a long moment before Dr. Carter spoke. Did anyone else notice something about their shields? He asked quietly. Jake turned to look at him. What do you mean? Carter was studying his readings with intense concentration. The energy field around that alien when he demonstrated his shield. It reacted to energy attacks and explosive force. But I'm wondering what would happen if something moved slowly enough with enough mass. Rodriguez raised an eyebrow. You think their shields might have weaknesses? Every technology has limitations. Carter replied, we just need to figure out what theirs are. Jake looked out at the stars, knowing that the future of humanity might depend on finding those limitations. The Zephyrians had given them 1 year to surrender or face conquest. It was time to get back to Earth and prepare for the fight of their species' lifetime. The USS Defiance traveled through space faster than it had ever moved before. Commander Jake Morrison had pushed the engines to their maximum capacity, racing back to Earth with news that would change everything. The bridge crew worked in shifts, around the clock, analyzing every second of their encounter with the Zephyrians. Every detail could mean the difference between survival and extinction. Dr. Ben Carter had not slept in 3 days. His eyes were red from staring at computer screens. But he could not stop studying the alien technology. The energy shield demonstration played over and over on his monitor. He watched the way the barrier absorbed the energy weapon, how it seemed to pulse and shift as it neutralized the attack. There has to be something, he muttered to himself. Captain Lisa Rodriguez found him in the science lab, surrounded by empty coffee cups and scattered data sheets. You need to rest, Ben, she said, sitting down beside him. We'll be at Earth in 6 hours. You won't be any help to anyone if you collapse from exhaustion. Carter shook his head and pointed at the screen. Look at this, Lisa. Really look at it. The shield doesn't just block the energy, it converts it. The alien fired an energy beam at himself, and the shield turned that energy into light and heat that dispersed harmlessly. Rodriguez watched the recording again. So their shields are designed to handle energy weapons. That makes sense if their entire civilization uses energy-based technology. Exactly, Carter said, his excitement growing. But what if we don't? Use energy weapons? What if we use something their shields weren't designed to handle? You mean kinetic weapons, bullets, and missiles? Rodriguez frowned. But they said their shields could redirect explosive force. Carter pulled up another section of the recording. They said explosive weapons have their force redirected, but that's not the same thing as stopping a solid object. Look at the way the shield reacts to the energy beam. It ripples and flows like water. But what happens when you try to stop a rock with water? Rodriguez began to understand. The rock goes right through. Maybe, Carter said, or maybe not. But it's the only advantage we might have. Their technology is thousands of years ahead of ours in every other way. When the USS Defiance reached Earth, emergency meetings were already being organized. President. Amanda Stone had received Jake's preliminary report, and the world's leaders were gathering to discuss humanity's response to the Zephyrian ultimatum. The meeting took place in a secure bunker beneath the Global Defense Headquarters in Colorado. President Stone sat at the head of a long table, surrounded by military leaders, scientists, and government officials from every major nation on Earth. General Paul Grant, head of the Global Defense Force, looked tired and worried. Let me make sure I understand this correctly, President Stone said. An alien empire with technology far superior to ours has given us 1 year to surrender or be conquered, and their weapons and defenses make our entire military obsolete. Commander Morrison stood to address the room. That's correct, Madam President. Their energy shields can stop anything we currently have. Our nuclear weapons, our missiles, our energy weapons, none of them would be effective against their defenses. General Grant rubbed his forehead. How many ships do they have? We don't know for certain, Morrison replied. But High Admiral. Vextar spoke as if their empire controls thousands of worlds. Even if they only send a small fleet, we would be vastly outnumbered. The room fell silent. The weight of humanity's situation pressed down on everyone present. Then Dr. Carter stood up, holding a folder full of his research. I may have found something, he said quietly. A possible weakness in their shield technology. Every eye in the room turned to him. President Stone leaned forward. Tell us. Carter walked to the front of the room and activated the display screen. The recording of the Zephyrian shield demonstration began to play. Their shields are designed to handle energy attacks and explosive force. But I don't think they were designed to stop slow-moving, high-mass objects. You mean bullets? Asked General Grant. Not regular bullets, Carter explained. Those move too fast and don't have enough mass. But what about large, dense projectiles moving at slower speeds? Something heavy enough and slow enough that their shields can't convert its kinetic energy into harmless light? Chief Engineer Maria Santos, who had been quiet until now, suddenly stood up. Dense materials like tungsten or depleted uranium. If we could launch projectiles made from those materials at precisely calculated velocities, the shields might not be able to stop them, Carter finished. General Grant looked skeptical. That's a big might. Are you willing to bet the survival of our species on a theory? What choice do we have? President Stone asked. If we surrender, humanity becomes slaves to an alien empire. If we fight with conventional weapons, we lose. This might be our only chance? Lieutenant Colonel Nick Davis, who had been listening quietly, spoke up. If we're going to try this, we need to do it right. We'll need new weapons, new tactics, and new training. Our entire military doctrine will have to change. President Stone made her decision. General Grant, I want you to put together a research team immediately. Dr. Carter, Engineer Santos, Colonel Davis, you'll lead the project. Everything else is secondary. We have 1 year to prepare for the most important battle in human history. The research facility was built in secret in the Nevada desert. Scientists and engineers from around the world worked together on what they called Project Slingshot. The name came from the biblical story of David and Goliath, a small primitive weapon defeating a much larger, more powerful enemy. Maria Santos led the engineering team that designed the new weapons. They created magnetic rail systems that could launch tungsten projectiles at precisely controlled velocities. Too fast, and the alien shields might detect and stop them. Too slow, and they would not have enough impact to cause damage. Finding the right speed required countless calculations and simulations. The key is understanding how their shields work, Santos explained to her team. They convert kinetic energy into other forms of energy, but every conversion system has limits. If we can find those limits, we can beat them. Meanwhile, Colonel Davis was training selected soldiers in new combat techniques. The men and women he worked with were the best fighters humanity had to offer, but they had to learn to think in completely new ways. Forget everything you know about modern warfare, Davis told his trainees. The enemy has never faced kinetic weapons. They don't know how to dodge bullets or take cover from artillery. Their entire military doctrine is based on energy shields and plasma weapons. Sergeant Tony Phillips, one of Davis's best soldiers, raised his hand. Sir, if their shields can't stop our bullets, why don't they have backup defenses? Because they've never needed them, Davis replied. Imagine if every war for the last 3,000 years was fought with the same type of weapons. You'd stop thinking about alternatives. That's what happened to the Zephyrians. They became too specialized. Dr. Carter worked with xenobiologists and physicists to understand alien psychology and technology. His team studied every second of the Zephyrian encounter, looking for clues about their capabilities and weaknesses. They're incredibly arrogant, Carter reported to President Stone during one of their weekly briefings. Vexstar dismissed our weapons without even testing them against their shields. That arrogance could be our advantage. How so? The president asked. They won't expect us to use kinetic weapons effectively because they think kinetic weapons are primitive. They'll probably use the same shield settings they've used for centuries. If our theory is correct, those settings won't protect them from our new projectiles. As the months passed, humanity's secret weapon began to take shape. Ships were retrofitted with magnetic rail launchers. Soldiers trained with new kinetic weapons designed specifically to penetrate energy shields. Supply chains were established to produce massive quantities of dense metal projectiles. Engineer Santos made breakthrough after breakthrough in projectile design. We're not just making bullets, she told her team. We're making shield breakers. Each projectile is designed to carry maximum mass at optimal velocity. The Zephyrians won't know what hit them. But even as hope grew, the enormity of their task weighed on everyone involved. They were preparing to fight an empire that had conquered thousands of worlds. Their secret weapon was based on theory and guesswork. If they were wrong about the shield weakness, humanity would face extinction. President Stone visited the research facility as the deadline approached. She walked through laboratories filled with humanity's brightest minds, all working toward a single goal. The weight of command had aged her visibly over the past year. Are we ready? She asked General Grant as they stood watching a test firing of the new railgun system. Grant watched as a tungsten projectile struck a test target with devastating effect. As ready as we can be, Madam President. If Dr. Carter is right about the shield weakness, we have a chance. If he's wrong, then we'll face our fate with dignity, President Stone replied. At least we'll go down fighting. The year was almost over. Soon the Zephyrians would return for humanity's answer. But instead of surrender, they would find a species that had turned its greatest weakness into its greatest strength. The alarm bells rang throughout the Earth Defense Command Center as massive energy signatures appeared on the edge of the solar system. Admiral Jake Morrison, promoted after his first contact with the Zephyrians, stood in the main command room, watching the tactical displays. What he saw made his blood run cold. 500 alien ships had appeared out of nowhere, their sleek silver hulls gleaming in the light of distant stars. Each vessel was enormous, dwarfing even Earth's largest battleships. They moved in perfect formation, like a school of deadly fish swimming through the darkness of space. "Communications are coming in from the lead vessel," reported Lieutenant Amy Walsh, her voice tight with tension. "It's High Admiral Vexstar, sir," Morrison nodded grimly. "Put him through?" The main screen flickered to life, showing the familiar pale blue face of the Zephyrian commander. Vexstar looked exactly the same as he had a year ago, his expression filled with the same arrogant confidence. "Commander Morrison," Vexstar said, then paused and smiled coldly. "I see you have been promoted, Admiral Morrison now, is it? I trust your species has had time to consider our generous offer." "We've considered it," Morrison replied, keeping his voice steady, "but we need to discuss terms." Vexstar's laugh echoed through the command center. "Terms? You misunderstand your situation, Admiral. There are no terms to discuss. You will surrender unconditionally, or we will demonstrate why resistance is futile." Behind Morrison, the command staff worked frantically. At their stations, Captain Lisa Rodriguez coordinated the defensive fleet, while Dr. Ben Carter monitored the alien ships from his science station. The human fleet consisted of 150 vessels, all equipped with the new kinetic weapons that Project Slingshot had developed. Against 500 Zephyrian warships, they looked pathetically small. "Your fleet is impressive," Morrison said, stalling for time while his ships moved into position. "But surely a peaceful solution would benefit both our species." "Peace will come when your species accepts its proper place in the galactic order," Vexstar replied. "Under Zephyrian guidance, humanity will abandon its violent ways and learn to contribute to civilization. Your primitive weapons will be destroyed, and you will be taught better methods of resolving conflicts." Rodriguez activated a private communication channel to Morrison. "Admiral, our ships are in position. The railgun systems are fully charged and ready to fire." Morrison nodded slightly, then turned back to the alien commander. "And if we refuse your offer?" Vexstar's expression grew cold. "Then you will join the other species who made that mistake. Your worlds will be conquered, your military destroyed, and your people will learn obedience through harder lessons." The alien admiral gestured to something off-screen, and one of his ships moved toward an unmanned space station that Earth had built for mining operations. The station was small and defenseless, but it represented months of human work and resources. "Observe," Vexstar said casually. A brilliant beam of energy erupted from the Zephyrian ship, striking the mining station. The structure vaporized instantly, turned into glowing gas that dispersed into space. The display of power was meant to terrify, and Morrison could see the fear on his crew's faces. "Impressive," Morrison said, though his heart was racing. "But that was an undefended target. Would you like us to demonstrate on a defended one?" Vexstar asked with amusement. "Your energy weapons are no match for our shields. Watch." The same Zephyrian ship that had destroyed the station now turned toward one of Earth's defense platforms. The platform immediately opened fire with its plasma cannons, sending bright bolts of energy streaking across space. The energy beams struck the alien ship's shields and simply vanished. Absorbed into the shimmering barrier that surrounded the vessel, the platform's missiles came next, nuclear warheads that could destroy entire cities. But when they struck the Zephyrian shields, the explosive force was redirected harmlessly away from the ship. The alien vessel remained completely undamaged. "As you can see," Vexstar said smugly, "your weapons are useless against us. We have perfected the art of warfare while your species was still throwing rocks at each other." Dr. Carter leaned over to Morrison and whispered urgently, Admiral, look at their shield configurations. They're using the same energy patterns we observed a year ago. They haven't changed anything. Morrison felt a spark of hope. If the Zephyrians were overconfident enough to use their standard shield settings, then Project Slingshot might actually work. But he needed more time to get his ships into optimal firing positions. Your technology is indeed advanced, Morrison said to Vexstar. But surely you can understand our reluctance to surrender our freedom without at least trying to defend ourselves. Freedom? Vexstar laughed again. What freedom do you have now? The freedom to wage war against each other? The freedom to destroy your own environment? The freedom to remain primitive and violent? We offer you something far better, the peace that comes from proper order. Engineer Maria Santos, monitoring the weapon systems from the command center, sent a quiet report to Morrison. All railgun systems are operational, Admiral. Tungsten projectiles are loaded and ready. We have clear firing solutions on 30% of their fleet. Morrison knew he was running out of time. The Zephyrians would not wait much longer for an answer. He had to make a choice that would determine the fate of humanity. How long do we have to decide? Morrison asked. The Vex single quotes Tar checked a device on his wrist. 1 of your hours, Admiral. That should be sufficient time for you to contact your leaders and accept the inevitable. After that, we will begin the conquest of your worlds. The communication ended, leaving the command center in tense silence. Morrison looked around at his crew, seeing determination mixed with fear on their faces. These men and women had spent the last year preparing for this moment, but theory was very different from reality. Admiral, Rodriguez said quietly, our ships are in position. We have overlapping fields of fire on their forward elements. If, we're going to do this, we need to strike first and strike hard. Colonel Nick Davis, who had been coordinating with the Fleet Marines, approached Morrison. Sir, our boarding teams are ready if we can disable any of their ships. But we need those shields to come down first. Morrison activated the fleet-wide communication system. All ships, this is Admiral Morrison. In 1 hour, we will either surrender our freedom or fight for it. I know the odds seem impossible, but we have something the Zephyrians don't expect. We have weapons they've never faced and tactics they've never seen. Remember your training, trust your equipment, and fight for humanity. As the hour passed, Morrison watched the alien fleet position itself for attack. The Zephyrian ships formed. A perfect battle line, their energy weapons charging for the assault. They showed no fear, no caution, no respect for human capabilities. Their arrogance would either be their strength or their downfall. Dr. Carter continued monitoring the alien ships, making final adjustments to the targeting systems. Admiral, I'm detecting the same energy patterns we studied. Their shields are configured exactly as we predicted. If our theory is correct, the tungsten projectiles should penetrate their defenses. And if our theory is wrong? Morrison asked. Carter met his eyes. Then we'll know in about 10 minutes. The final minutes ticked away slowly. Morrison's crew worked with quiet efficiency, making last-minute preparations for the battle that would determine humanity's future. The Zephyrian fleet waited with the patience of predators, confident in their superior technology. Finally, Vexstar's image appeared on the screen again. Your time is up, Admiral Morrison. What is humanity's answer? Morrison stood straight, his voice carrying the determination of his entire species. Our answer is this: humanity will never surrender its freedom. If you want our worlds, you'll have to take them. Vexstar's expression showed no surprise, only cold satisfaction. So be it. You have chosen extinction over wisdom. We will make your defeat swift and complete. The alien ships began to move forward, their weapons charging with deadly energy. Morrison looked at his crew one final time, then gave the order that would change everything. All ships, prepare to engage. Show them what happens when you underestimate the human spirit. The greatest battle in human history was about to begin. The space around Earth erupted in brilliant flashes of light as the Zephyrian fleet opened fire. Hundreds of plasma beams streaked across the darkness, turning the void into a deadly light show. The alien weapons were more powerful than anything humanity had ever seen, each blast capable of destroying an entire city. Admiral Jake Morrison gripped the railing of his command platform as the USS Defiance shook under enemy fire. The ship's energy shields flared and sparked, struggling to absorb the massive amounts of energy being thrown at them. Around him, the human fleet was taking heavy damage from the alien assault. Shield generators overloading on decks 7 through 12, called out Lieutenant Amy Walsh, her voice strained as she read damage reports. The Zephyrian weapons are too powerful. Our shields won't hold much longer. Captain Lisa Rodriguez worked frantically at her tactical station, coordinating the fleet's defensive maneuvers. The USS Defender has lost main power. The USS Guardian is reporting hull breaches on multiple decks. Admiral, we're being torn apart. Morrison watched the tactical display as red warning lights marked damaged human ships. The Zephyrian assault was devastating, exactly as everyone had expected. Their energy weapons cut through human defenses like hot knives through butter. But this was all part of the plan. High Admiral Vexstar's voice came over the communication system, filled with cold satisfaction. Are you beginning to understand, Admiral Morrison? Your primitive technology cannot stand against the might of the Zephyrian Empire. Surrender now, and we will spare the remainder of your fleet. Not yet, Morrison muttered under his breath. Then he activated his command channel. All ships maintain defensive formations. Make them think we're helpless. Doctor. Ben Carter monitored the alien fleet from his science station, analyzing their shield patterns and energy signatures. The Zephyrian ships moved with arrogant confidence, their crews certain of victory. Their shields glowed with the same steady energy patterns that Project Slingshot had studied for an entire year. Admiral, Carter reported quietly, their shield configurations are exactly as predicted. Standard energy absorption fields optimized for plasma and energy weapons. They haven't made any adjustments for kinetic threats. Engineer Maria Santos, coordinating the weapon systems from the command center, sent a coded message to all human ships. Magnetic rail systems fully charged. Tungsten projectiles loaded and ready. All ships report optimal firing solutions. Morrison knew this was the moment of truth. Everything humanity had worked for in the past year came down to the next few minutes. If their theory about the Zephyrian shields was wrong, the human fleet would be destroyed and Earth would fall. If they were right, they might just have a chance. All ships, Morrison commanded over the fleet channel, prepare to return fire. Target their forward ships first. Let's see how their perfect shields handle some good old-fashioned human engineering. The human fleet stopped its defensive retreat and suddenly turned to face the alien armada. Magnetic rail launchers that had been hidden beneath armor plating emerged from their concealment. The weapons looked crude and industrial compared to the elegant Zephyrian plasma cannons, but they represented humanity's best hope for survival. Fire. Morrison ordered. The first salvo of tungsten projectiles launched from the human fleet with barely a sound. Unlike the brilliant energy weapons of both sides, the railgun slugs were almost invisible as they streaked through space. Each projectile was a dense metal rod weighing several tons, accelerated to precisely calculated velocities by powerful magnetic fields. High Admiral Vexstar watched the human counterattack with amusement. Kinetic projectiles? They truly are. Desperate, no kinetic weapon can penetrate our energy shields. This will be their final, futile gesture. The tungsten slugs struck the leading Zephyrian ships exactly as planned. For a moment, nothing seemed to happen. The alien shields glowed brightly as they detected incoming objects and began their energy conversion process. But then something unexpected occurred. The first projectile punched straight through the shield of Vexstar's flagship as if the energy barrier did not exist. The dense tungsten rod tore through the ship's hull with devastating effect, creating a massive hole that vented atmosphere and debris into space. Emergency alarms began wailing throughout the alien vessel. Vexstar staggered as his ship shook from the impact. Impossible, he gasped, staring at the damage reports flooding his screens. The shields should have stopped that. How did a primitive projectile penetrate our defenses? More tungsten slugs found their targets throughout the Zephyrian fleet. The alien ships, designed to fight energy-based warfare, had no backup defenses against kinetic weapons. Their hulls, strong enough to withstand plasma blasts, could not stop the massive metal projectiles traveling at tremendous speeds. The USS Retribution, commanded by Captain Lisa Shang, led a squadron of destroyers in a close-range attack. All ships concentrate fire on their weapon systems. If we can disable their guns, they can't hurt us. Shang's squadron unleashed a barrage of guided missiles, each one carrying a tungsten warhead instead of explosives. The Zephyrian point defense systems, designed to intercept energy-based threats, could not track the unusual projectiles effectively. The missiles struck home, smashing through shields and destroying alien weapon arrays. Dr. Carter watched the battle with scientific fascination and growing excitement. "Admiral, it's working exactly as we predicted. Their shields are trying to convert the kinetic energy of our projectiles into harmless energy, but the mass and velocity ratios are all wrong. The conversion systems can't handle dense, slow-moving objects." Rodriguez coordinated the fleet's targeting, focusing their railguns on critical alien ship systems. "Target their command centers and engine sections. If we can cripple their leadership and mobility, we can turn this battle around." The Zephyrian fleet, which had begun the battle with absolute confidence, now found itself in chaos. Ships that had never taken damage in thousands of years of warfare were being torn apart by weapons they had dismissed as primitive. Crews that had never faced kinetic weapons had no idea how to defend against them. Vexstar frantically tried to adapt his tactics to this unexpected threat. "All ships adjust shield frequencies. Increase energy output to maximum levels." But the shield adjustments made no difference. The tungsten projectiles continued to punch through the energy barriers as if they were made of paper. The fundamental design of Zephyrian shields, perfected over millennia of energy-based warfare, had a critical flaw that no one had ever discovered. "Sir," one of Vexstar's officers reported with panic in his voice, "we've lost 30 ships already." "The human projectiles are ignoring our shields completely. Our defensive systems can't stop them." Morrison watched the tactical display with growing satisfaction as red markers indicated destroyed or crippled Zephyrian vessels. The impossible was happening. Humanity's primitive kinetic weapons were defeating the most advanced military technology in the galaxy. "All ships, press the attack," Morrison commanded. "Don't give them time to adapt. Hit them hard and fast." The human fleet, inspired by their unexpected success, fought with renewed determination. Ships that had been retreating in apparent defeat now advanced boldly into the alien formation. The USS Thunder, commanded by Captain Robert Hayes, led a charge directly into the center of the Zephyrian line. "This is for Earth," Hayes shouted over his ship's communication system as his rail guns fired continuously. "Show these aliens what happens when they threaten humanity." The Zephyrian ships tried to maintain their formation, but their perfect battle lines began to break apart as more vessels fell to the human assault. Ships that had dominated the galaxy for centuries found themselves helpless against an enemy they had completely underestimated. Santos reported from the Weapons Control Center. "Railgun systems performing beyond expectations. Projectile penetration rate is 97%. The Zephyrian shields might as well not exist." Morrison felt a surge of pride as he watched his fleet turn the tide of battle. Humanity had taken its greatest weakness and turned it into an unbeatable strength. The aliens' own arrogance and overspecialization had become their downfall. "Admiral," Carter called out urgently, "I'm detecting panic communications throughout their fleet. They're trying to retreat and regroup." "Don't let them escape," Morrison ordered. "If they get away, they'll adapt their technology and come back stronger. We need to end this now." The battle that had begun with humanity facing certain defeat was becoming a rout. The Zephyrian Empire, masters of the galaxy for 3,000 years, was learning a hard lesson about the dangers of forgetting the basics of warfare. The space around Earth was filled with the wreckage of Zephyrian ships. What had once been the most feared fleet in the galaxy was now a collection of broken hulls and drifting debris. More than half of High Admiral Vextar S-500 warships had been destroyed or crippled by humanity's kinetic weapons. Admiral Jake Morrison stood on the bridge of the USS Defiance, watching as the remaining alien vessels tried desperately to retreat. Their perfect formation had collapsed into chaos, with ships fleeing in all directions. The Zephyrian Empire, which had conquered thousands of worlds, was running from a species they had called primitive. "Admiral," Captain Lisa Rodriguez reported. From her tactical station, the alien fleet is in full retreat. 60% of their ships are either destroyed or too damaged to fight. Should we pursue them? Morrison considered the question carefully. The human fleet had achieved something impossible, but they were still outnumbered. More importantly, he did not want to turn victory into a massacre. No, let them go. But maintain targeting locks on any ship that shows signs of regrouping. High Admiral Vextar S flagship limped through space, its hull scarred by multiple tungsten projectile impacts. The proud Zephyrian commander sat in his damaged command center, staring at reports that made no sense to him. His superior technology had been defeated by weapons his species had abandoned thousands of years ago. "Sir," one of his officers said. Hesitantly, "The humans are broadcasting a message." "They're offering to discuss surrender terms?" Vextar laughed bitterly. "Surrender terms? They're offering us surrender terms?" He paused, the reality of the situation finally sinking in. "Very well, put them through." Morrison's image appeared on the alien ship's main screen. The human admiral looked tired but determined, showing no sign of the arrogance that might be expected from a victor. "High Admiral Vextar, I'm offering you and your remaining ships the chance to surrender peacefully." Surrender? Vextar could barely speak the word. In 3,000 years of Zephyrian expansion, no enemy had ever been in a position to demand their surrender. "Your weapons. How did they penetrate our shields? It should have been impossible." Dr. Ben Carter stepped into view beside Morrison. "Your shields are designed to handle energy-based attacks by converting kinetic energy into harmless light and heat. But that conversion process has limits. Our tungsten projectiles move at precisely calculated velocities with enough mass to overwhelm your shield's conversion capacity." Vextar stared at the human scientist. "You studied our technology and found its weakness?" "Every technology has weaknesses," Carter replied. "Your civilization became so focused on energy-based warfare that you forgot about kinetic weapons entirely. Your shields are perfect for fighting other Zephyrians, but useless against anyone who still uses projectile weapons." The alien admiral felt something he had never experienced before: respect for an enemy. These humans had taken their greatest disadvantage and turned it into a weapon that defeated the galaxy's most advanced military. It was a lesson in humility that the Zephyrian Empire desperately needed. "What are your terms?" Vextar asked quietly. Morrison consulted with his staff before answering. "Immediate cessation of hostilities, withdrawal of all Zephyrian forces from human space, and establishment of a formal peace treaty between our species. That's all?" Vextar was surprised. "You're not demanding tribute or territory? You're not claiming the right to rule over us?" "We're not conquerors," Morrison replied. "We just want to be left alone to develop our own civilization, but we're also not naive. We know that other alien species might threaten us in the future. We're willing to discuss mutual defense agreements if your people are interested." Engineer Maria Santos, who had been monitoring the conversation from Earth, joined the discussion via communication link. "Admiral Vextar, our species could learn a great deal from each other. Your energy technology combined with our kinetic weapons could create defensive systems that no enemy could overcome." Vextar considered this proposal. His empire had dominated the galaxy through superior technology and military might, but they had grown stagnant and overconfident. These humans had reminded them that innovation and adaptability were more valuable than technological superiority. "I will need to consult with the Zephyrian High Council," Vextar said finally. "But I believe they will be very interested in your Proposal: you have proven that we have much to learn from your species. The formal negotiations took place 3 weeks later aboard a neutral space station that both sides constructed together. The station itself was a symbol of cooperation, combining Zephyrian energy technology with human engineering principles. President Amanda Stone led the human delegation, while Vexstar represented the Zephyrian Empire. The High Council was not pleased to learn of our defeat, Vexstar admitted during one of their private conversations. But they understood the lesson you taught us. We had become too set in our ways, too convinced of our own superiority. President Stone nodded sympathetically. Power can be dangerous that way. It makes you forget that there's always someone out there who might think of something you missed. The peace treaty that emerged from the negotiations was unlike anything the galaxy had ever seen. Instead of the usual terms of conquest and submission, it established genuine equality between the two species. The Zephyrian Empire would respect human sovereignty, while humanity would share its kinetic weapons, technology for defensive purposes only. Dr. Carter worked closely with Zephyrian scientists to develop new hybrid defense systems. The key is layered protection, he explained to a mixed group of human and alien engineers. Energy shields for energy weapons, kinetic barriers for projectiles, and adaptive systems that can handle threats we haven't thought of yet. Santos led joint engineering, teams that created revolutionary new technologies. Human magnetic rail systems were combined with Zephyrian energy manipulation to create weapons that were both more powerful and more efficient than either species could build alone. It's amazing what we can accomplish when we work together instead of fighting, Santos told her team as they completed the first prototype of a hybrid defense platform. The news of humanity's victory spread quickly throughout the galaxy. Other alien species that had submitted to Zephyrian rule began to reconsider their positions. Some declared independence, while others demanded renegotiation of their treaties. The balance of power in the galaxy had shifted dramatically. Colonel Nick Davis, now promoted to general, established training programs that taught both human and Zephyrian soldiers how to work together. The enemy of tomorrow might be completely different from anything either of our species has faced. He told his mixed classes, we need to be ready for anything. 6 months after the battle, Vexstar visited Earth as part of the cultural exchange program. He stood in the same command center where humanity had planned their desperate defense, now converted into a joint research facility. I must admit, Vexstar said to Admiral Morrison as they looked out at the stars, when I first met your species, I thought you were simply primitives who had stumbled into space travel. I was completely wrong, Morrison smiled. We're all primitives in some ways. The trick is knowing which primitive skills are still useful. Your people forgot about kinetic weapons because you moved beyond them. We never forgot because we never had anything better. And that saved your species, Vexstar observed. Perhaps it saved mine as well. We had grown weak in our strength, blind in our superiority. Your victory reminded us that the universe is full of surprises. As the two former enemies watched ships from both their fleets conducting joint training exercises, they reflected on how quickly everything had changed. The galaxy was no longer dominated by a single empire, but was becoming a place where different species could coexist and learn from each other. The lesson of the battle would be remembered for generations. Advanced technology was powerful, but it was no substitute for creativity, adaptability, and the willingness to challenge assumptions. Sometimes the oldest solutions were the most effective, and sometimes the greatest strength could become the greatest weakness. Humanity had proven that in the vast universe, there was always room for those who refused to give up and never stopped thinking of new ways to solve old problems.